We're back for Your Ears Only. I'm Eddie Robinson.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. I think Americans don't know sometimes which Mitt Romney they're dealing with. That was Texas Governor Rick Perry in the GOP presidential debate about Romney's shifting stance on abortion, social programs, and the Second Amendment. Romney, in turn, noted the Social Security stand in Perry's book last year. There's a Rick Perry out there that's saying the federal government shouldn't be in the pension business. You better find that Rick Perry and get him to stop. Now this.
There's a path for recovery. It's narrower than it was 3 years ago when we first were hit by the financial crisis, but there is a path for recovery.
And there's no threat of government shutdown. Let's just get this out there.
There was a certain sense of wishing to make it so last week as International Monetary Fund Managing Director Christine Lagarde foresaw a chance to forestall impending failures by some European banks and countries, and by the U.S. House Speaker John Boehner assuring enough bipartisan cooperation to prevent a government shutdown over emergency relief spending and budget cuts that his adamant conservatives demand to offset it. But doubts on each side of the Atlantic continued, and the latest Federal Reserve plan to push down long-term interest rates was read less as stimulus than warning of worse to come, pushing the stock market into its worst plunge since 2008.
To consider the financial fears feeding on one another at home and abroad, for Your Ears Only, we have Dr. Petra Beck, a former German central bank analyst, political and financial advisor, author of The Missing Link, a rescue plan for President Obama, 7 Steps to a Win-Win Economy from Papyrus Publications, and her Beckonomics.com website. Welcome to our program.
Thank you very much for having me.
What's been your reaction to the way German leader Angela Merkel has pressed her country into leading the efforts to avoid Eurozone defaults?
It was already the case earlier on when the economic advisors in Germany said, don't worry about it. Portugal will cost us 1 percentage point off the sales tax. Greece is to be neglected because it's just the equivalent of a medium-sized province in Germany in terms of GDP. But now, of course, the situation has become much worse, and there will be serious repercussions on French banks if Greece is going to default again. She will do anything possible and impossible to try to solve this issue, but of course it is unsolvable.
Do you see the Greek people going along with the latest austerity measures demanded for a second round of bailout cash from the IMF?
It is completely unrealistic because people are starving right now in Greece. People are hitting the streets already for a very long time. It is very unreasonable what is being done because if you look at the fact that the European Central Bank lent money to commercial banks in Europe at very low interest rates, we are talking about 0 to 2%, and then the commercial banks turning around and giving the money at double-digit rates to Greece after the first default. So now I'm asking you, is that a solution? It will lead to another default, and it's an endless problem.
In the United States, even some Democrats see President Obama's job creation program and the additional tax revenue to finance it less as economic medicine than a political platform for his reelection. What's your view?
Absolutely. That is very correct. We are in a deadlock. Everybody knows that. In the beginning of his term, he was able to do something. He did not. He focused entirely on healthcare. He ignored the economic crisis. And right now, as the Republicans, of course, dominate legislative matters, he can't do anything anymore but holding great speeches and introducing wonderful measures that will never be introduced or only partially.
And hopefully, at least as he sees it, energizing his Democratic base so he has 4 additional years to try to do something.
Yeah, well, what could he possibly do? We need a new economic paradigm. We are at a time right now that everybody can tell that we have reached a point of no return. So my take on this is that we need a new economic theory to pull us out of this.
Well, you've talked about a missing link between the monetary system and the actual production of goods and services, suggesting in one of your postings that barter was at least a short-term answer. But how far can that really go in a globalized economy?
Well, it can go very far. The missing link is us. The monetary supply is actually there to supply the flow of goods and services. Right now, the monetary supply has been blown out of proportion and is supporting speculative movements around the globe. So that's not the purpose. That's why I'm making this suggestion. Okay, we have to think about the future. We cannot continue to complain and worry about what is going to happen at the political level. We have to take our lives in our own hands. And with barter, that would be recognized, meaning there would be no more paper standard, because a paper standard leads inevitably to expropriation earlier or later, because the printing of money is left to a few people.
But how does international trade work on a barter system that, was developed really between local villages, towns, tribes back in prehistory?
No, you can't look at it that way. That is absolutely correct if you look at the definition of barter. But right now we have the technological means to make it work at another level. If you look at instant settlement, and that's what you were talking about, David, then of course barter would lead to a collapse of trade. I'm not looking at that. You have to abandon instant settlement. If you put credit out there for people who actually produce something, and then you can walk into a store and still buy something. You would still have an account, but it would be barter, which means that you actually get what you deserve, and money will not be printed at random.
And despite our age of globalization, you do see more of a role for community economic approaches. Like what?
Well, the problem is that an economic recovery has to be bottom up. We have seen that trillions of dollars were sitting on the sidelines, not creating jobs, being supposed to create jobs. Infrastructure investments not being taken care of. So that is a very big disappointment. So what I'm saying is, okay, we have to create a bottom-up recovery here. For instance, infrastructure development by donation of land by its citizens and people to help each other. Also develop strategic alliances between communities. Let's say you have agricultural equipment, but you have no agriculture going for you whatsoever, like in the big areas such as Detroit, but you need something else. Let's say you want to have agricultural products, so you could partner with a community in California to get that going for you. I mean, it's a very simple example, but that would be people working with people to do something.
And also working with the technology that permits much more effective long-distance communication and coordination.
Absolutely. And then also, of course, the settlement. I mean, we cannot exchange coconuts against bananas. I mean, that is the past. Yes, that was done in the past. Barter was the very first means of trade, but we can develop it further with the help of technology to have accounts and to move us along, because we need a solution. There must be a solution for the people too. If you look at the cost approach that has been dominating economics now for hundreds of years, we have come to a point of time when that is impossible.
Dr. Petra Beck is a former German central bank analyst, political and financial advisor. She's the author of The Missing Link, a rescue plan for President Obama, 7 Steps to a Win-Win Economy, from Papyrus Publications and her Beconomics.com website.
This quote from the news: "This is two big rivals getting into each other's backyards." That was Forrester research analyst Sean Corcoran on the new Facebook page format that shows what products, services, and entertainment your friends are enjoying at any moment, recommendations that pose a threat to search giant Google.
Next, an inside view of last week's Clinton Global Initiative session, for your ears only.